So the boards and the components finally arrived. Unfortunately, there's slight issues with both, and we'll get into those in just a second. But here's the boards um, and the components, actually. When we put this under the microscope, we are going to try to solder this in two ways. One, hand soldering each of the individual components, and then secondly, using a solder stencil and a hot air rework station. Now that I've actually never done, so that's liable to be a fun little trip with some choice words, but we'll see. So give me a second and we'll get this switched over to the microscope and start laying out components and getting them soldered up. Okay, so here's the board under the microscope. And one of the glaring things to me, if you look at the track widths, let me grab something to point these out. So this is the pad for the XL4015. You see how much smaller that trace is in comparison to the pad. Now, I originally designed this to be able to handle up to 3 amps, but those track widths are not going to do it. So this will be fine for testing as a proof of concept, solder it together, make sure that it works. I just can't put a heavy load on it. I'll redesign that in the next version and make these tracks just a little bit thicker. And we will go from there. So the next thing we're going to do is sort out all of our components, get them ready to get soldered on. We'll do a little board prep, and I'll show you how small these things actually are. So bear with me just a second. Okay, we're going to do the size comparison first. I'm going to bring in a dime. And the dime pretty much takes up the entire field of view of the microscope. We're using two different sizes of surface mount components. One is an 0805 and the other one is an 0603. This is an 0805 capacitor. And this is an 0603 capacitor. If it'll unstick. There we go. Those guys are absolutely tiny. And with my old eyes, this is going to be fun. So let me get all these components lined out and we'll start the board prep and I'll explain what I'm going to be doing there and we'll get this soldered up. So here are most of the components lined out. We've got the three 1 microfarad capacitors, top left. Then we've got a 33 microfarad. Well, that's another one of my mistakes. I told you there were some mistakes in the components. So it was supposed to be 33 microfarad. What I ordered was 33 nanofarad. So I'm going to have to update parts on that. But again, for testing it out and making sure that the proof of concept works, that'll be just fine for now. We've got the 1.8K resistor, 220 ohm current limiting resistor for the LED. That's the little guy that in white with the green arrow. And then underneath that is the fast switching Schottky diode. The only things that are not listed or not seen in the shot here is the inductor, the 50K potentiometer, and the XL4015 chip itself. So now I'm going to adjust these components off to the side so they're within easy reach. I'll bring the PCB back in, we'll swab it down with some alcohol, clean the surfaces, tin some of the pads, and get ready to get started on this. Alright, so we're going to wipe the board down with some isopropyl alcohol here. I've got my parts all set aside and ready to go. The general order, or I guess the best way to do things, is start from your smallest components and work your way up. Obviously, if you put in your largest components first, it's going to make it very hard to work around the surface there. Because then you've got to try to solder in between big parts and it's just kind of a pain. So we're going to start with the capacitors first. the 1 microfarads, C1, C5, and C6. So there's C1 there. We'll put a little bit of flux on that pad. And I'm using a new flux dispensing tool, so there's no telling how this is going to go either. Watch me put a big old blob on there. Or nothing. Yeah, come on. I feel it moving. I don't see anything coming out though. Come on. Hey, 10 minutes of watch me try to get flux out. That's great. Really? There we go, finally. Okay. Alright, now grab some solder, tin my lead real quick, and here we go. Grab a 1 microfarad, bring this guy in. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Okay. We'll solder the other side. There we go. Now to C5. Back with the flux. And it's hard to get a feel for how much pressure to put on this. Come on. There we go. There, go there. Okay. It's hard to pick these little guys up with the tweezer. Yep. This is not going anywhere near as well as I had hoped. But that's part of the learning. Stay. Dope. All right. So I generally do one side, just to tack it in place, then do the other side on a full solder, and then go back to the original side and finish touching that one up. Flux. Come on. Yeah, I gotta find a better method for that. So, I think, yeah. All right. Finicky. Turn this to make it a little easier to solder. Clean my tip real quick. So tiny. Boy, that's ugly. There we go. That's a little better. Alrighty, now we'll move on to the other capacitor. Okay, apparently somewhere through the mix of this, I had paused the video because I lost the 33 nanofarad capacitor. And apparently I forgot to restart the video. So there's a whole bunch of components that have been skipped. So with the magic of video editing, we'll jump to the scenes that are complete. Okay, so here it is